On a quiet street lined with towering trees, a family moved into their new home. A spacious house with wide windows and rooms that stretched further than the eye could see. It was the kind of house that promised comfort and safety, a place where memories would be made. But there was one part of the house that stood apart, a heavy wooden door at the bottom of the hallway, locked tight with a rusted old key. The parents had decided to keep that key upstairs, tucked away in a drawer far from reach. For now, the basement was off limits, a space they wanted to keep sealed, untouched, and forgotten. The reason was never explained to the teenage daughter, but the quiet warning in their eyes said enough. That night, with a storm gathering outside, the parents left the house, trusting their daughter to stay safe alone for the first time. As the sun disappeared behind thick, gray clouds, the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Soon, the rain hammered against the roof and windows, turning the house into a cocoon of darkness and sound. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the branches so violently they scraped against the siding like fingernails on a chalkboard. Inside, the house seemed to change. The warm glow of the lights felt distant, flickering faintly as the storm's power pulsed. Every creak of the floorboards sounded louder in the growing gloom. The old wood groaned as if the house itself was shifting beneath the weight of the rain and wind. Shadows stretched across the walls, bending and twisting in the flickering light. The locked basement door stood like a silent sentinel, its dark wood polished smooth but cold to the touch, separating the unknown depths below from the warmth of the rooms above. The teenager, her name was Mia, moved cautiously through the halls, feeling the strange heaviness in the air. The storm outside made the house feel smaller and colder, like it was closing in around her. She glanced once at the basement door, a shiver running down her spine despite the warmth of the room. Alone for the first time in this strange new place, she tried to steady her nerves, but the sense that something waited just beyond that door lingered like a shadow. As the storm raged on outside, Mia settled into the house, trying to keep her mind busy with small tasks, organizing her room, unpacking a few boxes, and occasionally glancing at the locked basement door. It sat there at the end of the hallway, unchanged and unmoving, yet somehow impossible to ignore. The sound of rain pounding the roof mixed with the distant rumble of thunder, and every now and then, a sharp gust rattled the windows and made the old house creak in reply. At first, it was small things, a soft thud from below, as if something had shifted in the basement. Mia paused and listened carefully, but the storm outside drowned out the faint noises. She chalked it up to settling furniture or water dripping somewhere unseen. Still, a knot of unease began to form in her chest. Hours passed, and the noises grew more persistent. Scratching sounds, like nails dragging slowly along concrete walls, echoed faintly from beneath the floorboards. The basement door, though locked tight, seemed to vibrate ever so slightly, a subtle tremor that Mia could feel through the floor. Each time she approached the hallway, her breath caught in her throat, and her eyes flicked nervously to that solid barrier. The lights flickered with increasing frequency as the storm's fury intensified. Shadows danced and stretched across the walls, making the familiar rooms feel strange and unfamiliar. The air grew colder too, especially near the basement door, where Mia noticed her breath beginning to mist faintly in the chilling draft. She checked every window, every crack, but the cold wind seemed trapped near that one spot, as if it was leaking from the locked depths below. Then, as if the house itself was trying to warn her, the basement door creaked just a fraction. Barely perceptible, but enough to make Mia's heart slam against her ribs. She froze, listening intently as a slow, deliberate scraping noise began, scratching softly at the wood. It was a sound no wind or storm could make. Something was trying to get out. Mia backed away, her mind racing. Her parents were miles away, unreachable in the storm. Alone in this house that was beginning to feel less like a home and more like a trap, the locked basement door stood between her and the unknown. But for the first time, she wondered if it was keeping something in or keeping her out. The night was thick with tension as Mia found herself drawn back to the basement door once more. The scraping had stopped, but an uneasy silence had taken its place, heavier, darker. She could almost feel the weight of something pressing just beyond that locked barrier. The cold that had been lingering near the door now seemed to seep into the hallway itself, chilling her skin despite the warmth of the storm raging outside. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob. The cold metal was icy against her skin, sending a shock up her arm. She knew the door was locked tight. Her parents' warnings echoed in her mind, but the pull to see what was below became impossible to resist. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and the lights flickered violently, casting wild shadows that leapt across the walls like dark shapes moving on their own. In that moment, a low thumping began from beneath the floor, a slow, steady beat that echoed up through the house. It sounded like footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer and closer to where Mia stood. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it might burst from her chest. She pulled her hand back from the doorknob, but the thumping did not stop. Suddenly, the basement door creaked open just a crack. Mia gasped, frozen in place as the darkness inside seemed to press forward, like a living thing reaching for her. The cold draft surged, carrying with it a faint, sour smell, damp earth and something else, something metallic and old. Her eyes searched the darkness, trying to make out any shapes, any sign of what lurked inside. But the blackness was deep and endless. Then, as if summoned by her fear, faint handprints appeared on the dusty floor just inside the doorway, fresh and warm against the cold concrete. They seemed to reach out, as if something invisible was crawling toward her. Mia stumbled back, panic flooding her senses as the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered off completely, plunging the house into darkness. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the sound of footsteps circled above, slow and purposeful, as if the house itself was alive and stalking her every move. When morning light finally seeped through the curtains, Mia was found standing outside the house, trembling and pale, unable to explain what had happened inside. Her parents rushed in, unlocking the basement door with the old key they had kept hidden for years. But what they found left them as shaken as Mia. The basement was empty. No footsteps, no signs of movement, just the cold, silent concrete and walls coated with decades of dust. The strange handprints Mia saw had vanished without a trace. It was as if nothing had been there at all. Later, Mia learned that the basement had been sealed off for years before the family bought the house, long before the current owners. Stories whispered among neighbors spoke of a previous tenant who had disappeared without explanation. Some said the basement was better left alone. The family moved out shortly after, unable to shake the feeling that something was still watching from beneath the floorboards. And to this day, the locked basement door remains sealed, a silent guardian of whatever it was that once lived, or still lives, down below. The night had settled quietly over a small suburban street, where Kira had just stepped inside her very first home. The kind of home most dream about, a fresh start, new beginnings, and a blank slate waiting to be filled with memories. The front door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed oddly in the stillness. She paused for a moment, breathing in the air. It was crisp and carried that unmistakable scent of new paint, polished wood, and the faint sharpness of fresh plaster. The kind of smell that promises nothing but clean walls and open possibilities. But as the door shut tight, the silence inside was something else. Not the comfortable quiet you find after a busy day, but a strange, almost heavy silence that seemed to press down on the empty rooms. No hum of appliances, no creaks or groans from settling wood. Just a stillness so complete it felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting. The walls, bare and white, seemed to close in more than they opened up. Shadows gathered in the corners, not cast by anything but seeming to exist on their own. Kira moved slowly from room to room, her footsteps the only sound. Her voice, when she called out to the empty house, felt small and unsure. Excitement mixed with something sharper, an uneasy edge she couldn't quite place. This was her space now, and yet something about the air made her skin crawl. Maybe it was the way the shadows flickered near the window, or the faint sound of something scraping against the back door. Soft enough to ignore, but too deliberate to be just the wind. Alone for the first time, Kira tried to settle in. She unpacked a few things, trying to fill the quiet. But every time she thought she heard a creak or a knock, her heart leapt, only to remind herself it was just the house, just the night. And yet, when she switched off the lights and stood alone in the dark, a new kind of silence took over, one that wasn't empty at all. Kira was still trying to convince herself that the house was simply settling in the quiet night when the first knock came. It wasn't the kind of knock you expect when someone's at the door, loud or urgent, but soft, deliberate, and measured. She froze, heart pounding in her chest, eyes darting to the front door. Slowly, she stood and moved toward it, her footsteps barely making a sound against the smooth floor. She peered through the peephole, but there was nothing. No shadow, no figure, just empty darkness stretching beyond the porch light. She backed away, telling herself it must have been the wind or a stray branch hitting the door. Yet, moments later, it happened again. 3 soft taps, steady and slow. Still no one outside. The silence that followed after each knock felt heavier, as if the house itself was listening. Kira's breath caught in her throat as she debated whether to call someone or just wait it out. Then came the lights. In the narrow hallway leading to the bedrooms, the overhead light flickered. Once, twice, then went dim, but only when Kira wasn't looking directly at it. Each time she turned to face the light, it steadied, glowing steady and warm. But the moment her gaze shifted away, a quick pulse of darkness and light played tricks with her eyes. It was as if the house was breathing around her, watching her, teasing her. She tried to dismiss it as faulty wiring or the storm rumbling outside, but then the cold came. A sudden drop in temperature that wasn't just the evening chill. It gathered in one room, the guest bedroom on the second floor. Kira stepped inside, hoping to feel warmth from the heater, but the air was icy, biting at her skin even though every window was shut tight. Her breath came out in small, visible clouds, and goosebumps prickled her arms as a breeze, thin and sharp, whispered past her. Trying to shake off the growing unease, Kira started to head downstairs, but then she heard it, the softest footsteps above her. Not hurried or heavy, but slow and careful, paced as if someone was walking just out of sight. She stopped, every nerve on edge, straining to listen. The steps moved across the floorboards, pausing, then moving again, a rhythm like a heartbeat echoing through the quiet house. But the impossible truth settled in. She was alone. There was no one else in the house. Every shadow seemed to twitch at the edges of her vision. Every floorboard creaked under the weight of an unseen presence. Kira's pulse quickened as a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. The house was no longer just a place of new beginnings. It had become a space where something waited, patient, silent, and watching. And she was right in the middle of it. Kira's heart thundered as the footsteps grew louder, now directly above her in the empty second-floor hallway. She stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, every muscle tense, every breath shallow. The silence around her thickened, as if the very air was holding its breath alongside her. Then suddenly the knocks returned, this time coming from inside the house, not the front door. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks echoed through the walls behind her, coming from the living room. Kira's eyes flicked toward the darkness beyond the hallway, and she forced herself to take a step forward, then another. Each movement was slow and heavy, like wading through water, but her legs carried her onward. Her hands trembled as she reached for the light switch, but the lights flickered wildly again, leaving her momentarily swallowed by shadow. In that darkness, something shifted. A whisper brushed her ear, soft and low, like a breath that wasn't hers. She spun around, but there was no one there. Her pulse jumped as the whisper returned, this time a faint, almost impossible to hear voice calling her name, slow and drawn out. It wasn't a shout or a cry, but a chilling murmur that seemed to curl inside her mind. Panicked, Kira fled toward the front door, desperate to escape the house that no longer felt safe. But when she reached it, her fingers froze on the doorknob. It was warm, too warm, as if someone on the other side had just touched it, pressing against the barrier between inside and out. She shook her head, trying to clear the creeping dread, and looked back into the hallway. There, just at the edge of the light, a shadow moved. Too fast to make out a shape, but it was definitely there, passing silently through the room like a ghost slipping through walls. Her breath caught. The footsteps were back now, but louder, more urgent, circling around her, echoing inside the empty house. Suddenly, the power cut out. Darkness slammed in like a physical force, swallowing every corner, every inch of the house. Kira's screams caught in her throat as cold hands brushed her shoulder, but when the light snapped back on a second later, she was alone again. Or so she thought. When the lights returned, the house looked just as it had before, the same quiet rooms, the same empty corners. But Kira knew better. Her skin still prickled from the cold touch she'd felt in the dark. She spun slowly, searching every shadowed space, every silent hallway, hoping to catch a glimpse of what had just brushed past her. But there was nothing. No shape. No figure. Just silence once more. Her heart was still racing, but her mind refused to let go of the unease that had settled deep inside her. She took a few cautious steps toward the kitchen, where she noticed something she hadn't before. A small note stuck to the refrigerator door. The paper was plain and white, but the message written in thin, uneven letters sent a chill crawling down her spine. "You're not alone." Her breath caught. She scanned the room, every corner, every doorway, but the house remained still, as if nothing had disturbed it at all. How had the note appeared? Who had left it? Her eyes darted to the windows and the locked front door, searching for any sign of an intruder. But there was none. Just Kira and the cold, silent house. That night, she stayed awake until the first light of dawn, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of footsteps pacing just beyond her hearing. When morning finally came, she packed a bag and left the house, her hands trembling and her mind filled with questions she knew she might never answer. Kira never returned. The house remained empty, waiting. And though neighbors would later swear they sometimes saw a shadow flicker past the windows or heard faint knocking late at night, no one else dared to stay. Sometimes the most terrifying things aren't visible, but they are always there, waiting quietly just beyond the edge of what we can see. Jacob was a man who prized simplicity. After years of city noise and cramped apartments, he finally found a home that matched his quiet, orderly life. The house was modern, sleek, and filled with light. Large windows stretched from floor to ceiling, flooding each room with sunlight during the day and moonlight at night. The walls were freshly painted in soft, neutral tones, and the floors gleamed with polished wood. Everything felt new and untouched, ready to become a part of his life. Among the carefully chosen furniture, there was one piece that didn't quite fit with the clean lines and contemporary style of the house. An antique mirror, tall and ornate, framed with carved wood that hinted at centuries past. It was left behind by the previous owner, who insisted it was an heirloom, too valuable to move. Jacob wasn't superstitious, but the mirror caught his eye the moment he stepped inside. On his first night alone, as he wandered through the empty rooms unpacking boxes and settling in, Jacob found himself drawn back to the mirror. He stood in front of it, adjusting his shirt, when something strange caught his attention. His reflection didn't move quite right. When he lifted a hand, the image hesitated, a fraction of a second too slow. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but enough to send a chill down his spine. He blinked, shook his head, and stared harder, convinced it was just a trick of the light or his own tired eyes playing games. But the delay persisted. When he turned away and glanced back quickly, the reflection seemed to lag behind, almost watching him rather than mirroring him. A flicker of something darker passed through the glass, a shadow or a shape just beyond the edges of the frame. Jacob tried to dismiss it as his imagination. He moved the mirror to another wall, thinking perhaps the angle or lighting was causing the odd effect. Yet, no matter where he placed it, the reflection remained just slightly out of sync, a ghostly echo of his movements, almost like another presence lurking inside the glass. As night deepened, the house settled into a quiet stillness, broken only by the soft ticking of a clock and the distant hum of the city beyond the windows. But the mirror seemed alive in the darkness, its surface catching the faintest glimmers of light, reflecting not just Jacob's image but something else, something waiting. He stood there longer than he wanted to admit, his eyes locked on the glass, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The delay in his reflection wasn't just a trick anymore. It was a warning, a subtle but unmistakable sign that the mirror held secrets, and that those secrets were watching him back. As the nights passed, Jacob's unease grew with the mirror's strange behavior. At first, it was just the delay, a subtle lag between his movements and the reflections. But soon, the reflection began to do things on its own, small differences that made his skin crawl. One evening, while brushing his teeth, Jacob noticed the reflection's eyes weren't quite matching his own. They seemed to flicker, shifting with a strange awareness, as if watching something he couldn't see. When he glanced quickly away and back, the reflection smiled, a slow, curling smile that didn't touch the real Jacob's face. He blinked hard, shaking his head. Perhaps it was fatigue, or the stress of moving, he told himself. But deep down, he felt the mirror watching, waiting, and somehow knowing. The mirror didn't just stay put. No matter how often Jacob tried to cover it with sheets or move it to darker corners, the reflection's presence seeped through other shiny surfaces. The polished glass of windows, the smooth screen of his phone, even the gleaming silverware in the kitchen caught fleeting images of that same unsettling face watching him. Sometimes, when the house was silent and still, Jacob heard whispers, barely audible murmurs that seemed to come from the mirror itself. Words he couldn't quite understand, soft and chilling, as if the glass was breathing secrets just beyond hearing. One night, Jacob awoke suddenly, drawn from sleep by a faint glow coming from the hallway. The mirror was bathed in pale light, its surface shimmering and rippling like liquid. His reflection was gone, replaced by a dark figure standing silently behind the glass, tall, still, and impossibly calm. Frozen with fear, Jacob watched as the figure raised a hand, waving slowly at him. His own body wouldn't move, caught in the terrifying grip of paralysis. The room grew colder, the air thick with an unseen presence pressing down on him. When he finally broke free and ran from the room, the mirror's glow faded, and the figure vanished, leaving only the empty glass reflecting his terrified face back at him. From that night on, Jacob knew the mirror was no ordinary object. It held something trapped inside, watching, waiting. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape its gaze. The nights that followed were even darker. Jacob found himself avoiding the room with the mirror, but the house seemed to have other plans. The mirror's presence seeped into every corner, invading his thoughts and filling the silent hours with restless shadows. One night, unable to sleep, Jacob stood before the mirror once again. The air in the room had grown thick and cold, wrapping around him like a shroud. His reflection stared back, yet something was different. The image smiled first, slow and deliberate, before Jacob could even move his lips. Then, impossibly, the reflection reached out. Jacob's breath caught in his throat as he felt a cold pressure against his chest, like a hand pressing from the inside of the glass. He tried to pull away, but his body froze, locked in place by a force he couldn't fight. The reflection's eyes gleamed with a dark intelligence, watching him with a hunger that sent ice through his veins. Suddenly, the glass seemed to ripple and pulse, as if the mirror was alive, breathing. The reflection's hand moved slowly, emerging from the frame, fingers stretching out into the room. Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears as the cold hand grazed his skin, sharp, chilling, impossibly real. Panic surged through him. His voice caught in his throat, but his mind screamed for escape. With every ounce of willpower, Jacob broke free from the paralysis and stumbled backward, crashing into a nearby wall. The hand vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, and the mirror's surface returned to its normal, cold stillness. Jacob collapsed to the floor, trembling, his heart pounding like a drum. The house was silent again, but the air remained thick with a presence that refused to leave. From that moment on, he knew he was no longer alone. Whatever lived within the mirror was watching, waiting for its chance to cross over. The morning light brought no comfort to Jacob. With a heart still pounding from the night's terrors, he packed his belongings and hurried silence. There was no hesitation, no second thought. He needed to leave that house, and fast. The mirror remained behind, standing tall and still in the corner of the room, its glass cold and unyielding. Weeks later, a new owner moved in. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but soon, reports began to trickle in. Whispers of a figure seen standing silently behind anyone who dared look into the mirror. The figure never moved, never blinked, it simply watched. Eyes fixed, waiting. Jacob's name came up in hushed conversations, a warning from someone who had escaped but knew the mirror's hold was not so easily broken. He realized with a cold certainty that no matter how far he ran, the mirror's reach was long. Some things don't stay trapped in glass. Thank you for staying with me through these chilling tales. Remember, sometimes the shadows in your own home are watching more closely than you think. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps bring more true stories right to your screen. Now tell me, which story scared you the most? Have you ever faced a moment when your own home felt different? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I read every one, and together, we'll uncover the secrets that lurk in the quietest places. Until next time, keep your lights on, and beware what's waiting just beyond the glass.